thou my vision, O God of my heart. Not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou lamest not by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, O thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my soul shelter and thy highest tower. Raise thou me heavenward, O power of my power. Riches I heed not, nor world's empty praise. Thou my inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only, now pure in my heart. Sovereign of heaven, my treasure thou art.
This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound and light and expectation. This day has been waiting for you. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms, just for you. This is the day we have been given. Let's not waste it. Come now and let us worship together. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Youngstown in Youngstown, Ohio, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I welcome you from coast to the coast in the United States, from New York to California, to Seattle, Washington, Colorado. I also welcome those who are joining us from afar in Brazil, other parts of Europe. Welcome into this sacred space. We are a unique kind of church. We do not require members to follow a creed or a set of beliefs about God in order to be a member of this very special place. Instead, we are bound together by a commitment to live our lives following the spirit of love, to serve our community, to dwell in peace, and to seek the truth in love. This church community has discerned the spirit of love to call us toward care for the vulnerable and the most marginalized. This is especially important right now, during this time. We have proudly waved a rainbow flag to signify this place as a sanctuary for any persons who identify as LGBTQIA. We have raised a Black Lives Matter banner, which is on the face of our church, to remind ourselves and our community that racism and institutions that support racism must transform if we are to become the beloved community. If you come to us this morning with a broken heart, welcome. If you come to us this morning with a searching and restless heart, welcome. If you come to us this morning in search of healing for yourself, for our communities, for our fractured and grief-ridden world, welcome. You're in the right place. We would love to get to know you better. If you would like to connect with us, please feel free to put your name and your email in the chat box down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get in touch with you so we can have more of a dialogue back and forth and see how this church community can serve your needs in the weeks, months, and year ahead. It seems that our Black Lives Matter signs are going very, very quickly. Many people in the community have wanted one, and this is very, very good news. We want to participate in spreading this message far and wide. We're still taking requests. We're ordering a new batch of signs, which should be in on Tuesday. If you would like a free Black Lives Matter sign for your yard, outside your house, outside your workplace, outside any place that you frequent, restaurant, cafe, any place that is public, we'll give you a free sign. So if you would like one for yourself, or if you know of other people that would want one, please again, put your email and your name in the chat box and just say BLM sign, and that will tell us that you want one, and we will get in touch with you and give you one of those. You know, I just wanted to say, personally my heart is very heavy right now. I know many of you have heard about the latest police shooting and murder in Atlanta, Georgia, of Rayshard Brooks, who fell asleep in his car in a Wendy's drive-thru and then was chased by the police and shot while he was fleeing, unarmed. I just want to say that there are rallies across the nation bringing awareness to this issue of police brutality and violence and deep racism in our country. And I just want to say, for those who do plan to attend those rallies, I do think it's very, very important. And please be careful. Please be careful health-wise, especially given that COVID-19 is still very real and we are uncertain about all the specifics of this disease. Please be very careful as you go out to these rallies. I know across the street from the church at 7 o'clock today, there will be a community rally, a drum circle, in honor of George Floyd and all those who have been lost to police brutality. If you go to that, please be careful, wear a mask, and please keep your physical distance. If you have a vulnerable health condition, or or you're at a, if you feel you're in a vulnerable spot, please reconsider, whether it would be right for you to attend. But if you do attend, please be very, very careful. We want to protect you, and we want to see you thrive, and we want to see our community thrive. So please be aware of that. I would also like to announce that on June 20th, we're going to have a virtual summer solstice service. It's called Litha in the pagan tradition. And a group of our members had a really cool idea to be able to honor the summer solstice virtually. On June 20th, there's going to be a live stream at Stonehenge, which is right outside Wiltshire, England. Many of you know, and the light will be streaming through Stonehenge for the summer solstice. And communities across the world virtually are going to be witnessing this very special event. So we're going to be hosting that on our Facebook page, as well as on our website. We'll send you the link to Stonehenge, and we'll all participate in this very beautiful time. So please join us for that. If you have a child, or if you know of any children in your community that want to participate in religious education, now is the perfect time. We're actually going to be restarting up our religious education beginning today at 12:30 p.m., and then every Sunday going forward throughout the summer at 12:30 p.m. And I'll read you a little bit about what will be covered in religious education. Mystery Wallace, who is our Director of Religious Education in California, sent me this. She said, "We will be learning about living things, such as bacteria, plants, and animals, and how these are present every day in our lives. Everything we do doesn't just affect us, but it also affects other living things and our world as a whole. So it is important that we learn about the effect and power of the choices we make in engaging with our living world." So this will be an all-ages curriculum, age-appropriate for each person. And you can join us on this Zoom link, 12:30 p.m. if you have a child or if you have anyone in your community who has a child. And again, this will be every Sunday at 12:30 p.m. My last announcement is many of you have been asking me, how long will we be doing virtual services here at UUIO? And our board has thought long and hard about this. We've consulted with the UUA, which is our denomination, and our denomination has consulted with various public health officials who have all delivered a pretty consistent message that right now we are still at a period where we don't know enough about the transmission of COVID-19, and we don't know enough to be able to say we can safely gather together in churches, though it is legal to do so. So the UUA has recommended to us that we plan to have virtual services until May 2021, knowing that if we get new information between then that says that it is safe for us to meet and gather, or that the risk is much lower than we anticipated, we can adjust and do so. So I wanted to share that with you, so we're not kind of stringing you along every month and you're wondering what's going to come next. So that's what we've decided to do as a church. The board just passed this on Thursday. We will remain virtual in our programming until May 2021 for the health and well-being not only of ourselves, but the most vulnerable. And as you know, the African American community and other marginalized communities are particularly vulnerable to the spread of COVID-19. And we want to do our part to try to keep this from spreading and harming our community. So that is what we're going to do going forward, knowing, again, we will adjust if we get new information in the meantime that says that it is safe. So I really welcome you to continue to join us here on this virtual channel, and it is my pleasure to be here with you. I now would like to go to Melissa Smith, who will be our chalice lighter from her home, and she will talk a little bit about our theme of the month, which is compassion. Melissa Smith.
Thank you, Reverend Joseph. As a specialist in languages, I always start thinking about a concept in terms of its etymology. Compassion, compassion, suffering with. It is more than sensing another's pain. It evokes a need for active participation. As a church, we are called on to share in our national suffering, which is incidents of racism combined with a deadly virus, or perhaps the other way around. I was born in lily white New England, so I had barely even seen an African American in the flesh before my father took a summer job in Williston, Florida, working for a college buddy. My mother that spring had fallen off a horse and broken her back, and in the hospital discovered that she was pregnant with my second brother. I was 7, my other brother was 2. Consequently, when we moved to Williston for the summer, we hired help for my mother in the form of Lizzie, an African American woman. While I was aware of the racial discrimination issues in Florida of 1959, the most searing experience of it for me was when we had taken a trip from Williston to Sarasota, and Lizzie had to use a bathroom. We stopped at gas station after gas station, asking if Lizzie could use the restroom, and had been refused each time. Finally, my father took it upon himself to negotiate with the gas station owner. Lizzie could use the restroom out back if my father stood guard so that no passerbys could see that an African-American woman was using their restroom. That was my family's first real experience with the sufferings of systematic racism. But I mentally compartmentalized racism as a disease of the South. By the 1960s, we had moved to suburban Boston, where my lone African-American classmate had a father who was on the board of Harvard Medical School and His daughter subsequently went to Radcliffe at Harvard. Foreign languages, literatures, and cultures became my emotional and intellectual passions. As a byproduct of my lengthy sojourns in early Soviet, post-Soviet Russia of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, I focused on what at home I saw as the myopic ethnocentrism of Americans living in the wealthiest, freest country on earth, viewing our lives as forms of suffering. Of course, when I moved to Youngstown, I appreciated it in part for its ability to confront me with these issues. Very few African American students entered my Russian language classrooms at YSU. And the African American student who participated along with me in Reverend Catherine Adams' service trip to a Russian orphanage in 1999 declared that she would never complain again about poverty in America, having seen the worst living conditions abroad. Of course, I knew of social inequities, but they remained on the margin of my existence. But here we are in 2020, confronting the ills of domestic racism, along with a threatening autocrat at the head of our government. While I have always recognized my own life as one of relative privilege, I realize how urgently every moment of our lives is one crying out for exercises of compassion. As one of my fellow worship associates put it in our brainstorming session, compassion is what we are in. So I light this chalice in the hopes that the fire of our commitment may help to serve our country, joining our compassion to universal suffering.
And now, if you'll join me in reading the covenant of our church. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Each month, we give to an organization that supports transformation in our community, which is the heart of our mission. In our church's historic commitment to the well-being of our community, we give 100% of our offering to those in need. UUYO's Giveaway the Plate recipient for June is Inspiring Minds of Youngstown. Inspiring Minds of Youngstown is a youth enrichment program dedicated to empowering underrepresented youth in our community through education and exposure to life-changing experiences. It is our vision to see the youth become leaders in politics, community, and industries that will impact generations in the inner city. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
If I could tell the world just one thing, it would be that we're all okay. Not to worry, 'cause worry is wasteful and useless in times like these. I won't be idle with despair. I will gather myself around my faith, for light does the darkness most fear. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours, they are my own. And they're not yours, they are my own. And I am never broken. Poverty stole your golden shoes, but it didn't steal your laughter. Heartache came to visit me, but I knew it wasn't ever after. We will fight not out of spite, for someone must stand up for what's right. 'Cause there's a man who has no voice, there are shell ghosts singing. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own, and they're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. In the end, only kindness matters. In the end, only kindness matters. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. I will get down on my knees and I will pray. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own, and they're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. My hands are small, I know, but they're not yours. They are my own. They're not yours. They are my own, and I am never broken. We are God's eyes, God's hand, God's mind. We are God's eyes, God's hand, God's heart. We are God's eyes, God's hands, God's eyes, God's hands. We are God's hands. We are God's hands.
Please join me in meditation.
The year was 1921, and the place was Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in that time and in that place was one of the biggest race massacres of the 20th century. Mary Jones Parrish authored a book entitled The Events of the Tulsa Disaster, and I'm going to read to you from that book a series of quotes that had to do from eyewitnesses that were at the event. First one's from Mary Jones Parrish, herself the author of the events of the Tulsa disaster. There was a great shadow in the sky, and upon a second look, we discerned that this cloud was caused by fast approaching aeroplanes. It then dawned upon us that the enemy had organized in the night and was invading our district the same as the Germans invaded France and Belgium. Former City Commissioner John Oliphant was describing the murder of Dr. A.C. Jackson. I heard him holler and looked up and saw him coming about 25 feet away from me, or 30, with his hands up, and he said, "Here am I." I said to the fellows, "This is Dr. Jackson. Don't hurt him." 2 men fired at him. He fell at the second shot from the high-powered rifle. John W. McCune, captain of the B Company of the 3rd Infantry Oklahoma National Guard, wrote this in his written report. Some Negroes who had barricaded themselves in houses refused to stop firing and had to be killed. James T.A. West, a high school teacher, said the following: "After lining up some 30 or 40 of us men, they ran us through the streets to Convention Hall, forcing us to keep our hands in the air all the while. While we were running, some of the ruffians would shoot at our heels and swore at those who had difficulty in keeping up. They actually drove a car into the bunch and knocked down 2 or 3 men. When we reached Convention Hall, we were searched again. There, people were herded in like cattle. The sick and wounded were dumped out in front of the building and remained without attention for hours." Jack Thomas quoted, "My greatest loss was my beautiful home and my family Bible." Dr. R.T. Bridgewater said, "Shortly after daylight on Wednesday, June 1st, 1921, I received a call to come to the hospital to dress 2 wounded men. I dressed hurriedly and started to the hospital. Just as I opened my front door, a shot was fired at me from a nearby hill. The bullet grazed my leg. I shut the door. A few moments later, my wife, hearing the shots, slightly opened the door, and a second volley was fired." Bridgewater was taken to Convention Hall to be held, but soon was released. He returned to find his home ransacked. He said, "I saw my piano and all of my elegant furniture piled in the street. My safe had been broken open, all of the money stolen, also my silverware, cut glass, all of the family clothing, and everything of value had been removed, even my family Bible."
Oxford town, everybody got their heads bowed down. The sun don't shine above the ground, ain't going down to Oxford town. He went down to Oxford town, guns and clubs, they followed him down. All because his face was brown, better get away from Oxford town. Oxford town around the bend, come to the door and he couldn't get in. All because of the color of his skin. What do you think about that, my friend? Me and my gal's son, we got met with a tear gas bomb. Don't even know why we come, better get back where we come from. The afternoon, everybody singing a sorrowful tune. 2 men died neath the Mississippi moon. Somebody better investigate soon.
As Melissa Smith stated beautifully in her chalice lighting, compassion is inseparable from suffering. Compassion is often thought of as a choice or insight to suffer with another person who is also suffering. There are endless opportunities for compassion because suffering is endless. This may seem at first glance to be a discouraging statement, but it's not. It doesn't have to be. Suffering is the ground of compassion. It is the raw material of which our life is made. And it is the raw material from which all our beauty and meaning comes from. But there is a difference between suffering and compassion. And it is very, very important that we understand that difference. Suffering is the chronic sense of things not being how we want them to be. On a personal level, few of us revel in the prospect of getting older, of getting sick and being vulnerable to sickness, and approaching our own death. We don't want that, understandably. On a national level, suffering is not wanting the police to murder our people, our American people, who are black and brown, and black people all over the world. We don't want this, of course. We don't want a corrupt government. We don't want to have our tax dollars support further environmental destruction and economic exploitation of the working class. Not everyone wants this. And the number that doesn't want that is growing exponentially. We don't want to live in a sham democracy. And we don't want to live a sham life with blinders on. Blinders to the problems of the world. Many people don't want this. We don't want to feel distressed every waking moment, unable to enjoy our life or feel a sense of contentment. Most of us don't want that either. All of this not wanting things to be the way they are is suffering. It's not necessarily the same as compassion. We can spend a lot of time simply not wanting things to be the way they are. We can easily spend an entire lifetime just not wanting things to be the way they are. It is so easy to become inundated with dissatisfaction, so overwhelmed by the seeming abundance of violence and cruelty, that any serious thinking person would have trouble getting up in the morning to greet a new day. For many years, I've spent good energy and time looking at the world and not wanting things to be the way they are. For years, the level of dissatisfaction and disenchantment with people and our institutions seemed to have no bottom. For years, when I looked at the world, I saw a gloomy, chaotic, violent, repressed, and unjust world. I wasn't wrong. There are many good reasons and many pieces of evidence to support this view. I don't need to give you that evidence because now we are so inundated with it. It took me years to understand that this view, while true, perhaps in some sense, was not compassion. It was only suffering. A good starting point, but not the complete picture. We are given the opportunity today for a compassionate moment if we develop the practice and vision to see it. Compassion is more than suffering. Compassion is to understand that suffering itself can, in its own time and in its own way, and in our unique situation, connect us to the suffering of the world. And if we see this through, without stopping, with enough communal support, without judgment, that suffering is no longer just suffering. Connected intimately to the suffering of our neighbors, connected to a suffering city and suffering world, experienced in the fullness beyond our judgment, is something more than suffering. This desire to connect deeply to our own suffering and a suffering world is the desire for love, to feel and be felt by another person, even if this great feeling is on our own in our house. Instead of suffering diminishing our life, it then begins to expand it. This is the transformation we speak of in our church mission statement. Transformation is discovering that the pain of suffering and life, instead of defeating us, can expand us with the right community, the right intention, and the right practice. Many of you have probably heard the term compassion fatigue. This is real. It's the sense that feeling the suffering of the world wears you down to the point of literally fatiguing you. Maybe some of you can relate to this. I've had many conversations with those who work in the helping professions, ministers, social workers, therapists, who have experienced compassion fatigue. They all shared with me a common experience that I try to take to heart. All of them felt solely responsible for the suffering they encountered and felt it was up to them alone to fix or ameliorate the situation. A natural backlash from this predicament I've also commonly witnessed. When a person seeks to unconcern themselves with the state of the world and the true state of their lives, so as to avoid the possibility of fatigue. Both of these positions seem to inevitably lead to trouble unless there is an adjustment. Feeling completely responsible alone for the suffering of the world, or feeling little or no responsibility. The kind of compassion I seek to practice is found in the middle, between these two extremes. I can't do everything, but I can do something. That has been a very good mantra for me. I can't do everything, but I can do something. I have my limits in every sense, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I can't fix the world alone. This may seem obvious, but it's a good reminder. But I'm also responsible for it. Not alone, not completely responsible, but responsible. I owe the world my part. Finding that part, finding that role for each of us is part of the mission of this church. In discovering our unique role in healing our world, suffering is no longer just suffering. It becomes something else. As I've said for years, I felt completely inundated and overwhelmed. I still have days like that. I'm really not that different from many of you, especially after the brutal death of George Floyd. It took me about a week before I began to cry. It's sometimes taken me years, so a week is progress for me. But I now understand something that I did not know a few years ago. There is something more than suffering. And this something more is not an escape or denial of pain or trouble in ourselves or in our world. I've learned that given the right conditions of intention in a caring community like this, with regular committed practice of doing what we can within our own limitations, there is something more than suffering. There is the possibility of connection. A connection that is transformative because it is healing, gentle, and consistent. A consistent strength that exists even in horrific circumstances. I've only just recently discovered this. Compassion is just as real as suffering, maybe even actually more real. It is pervasive if we can find the right conditions, the right intention, and consistent practice to do what we can, where we are, and how we are in this world. I have spoken to many people over the years about racism and how there is a sense that it will never go away and be with us until the end of time. It is reasonable when one looks at suffering to just see endless suffering going on forever. I don't think this is inaccurate. It just misses something very crucial, something that is more than suffering, that is also present. We are living in a compassionate moment. We are living in a moment so full of suffering of every imaginable kind. And this suffering has reached such a heightened pitch that it is now becoming something else. It is becoming a kind of transformative power that allows for greater integrity, greater honesty, and greater understanding. Greater integrity, greater honesty, and greater understanding. This is love. It is one of my favorite things about this church. We don't put love up on a pedestal, like something that is otherworldly or beyond us. It is not a deity. Love is an active force in each of our lives at this moment. Love is not the absence of suffering. It is the tending carefully to suffering until it becomes more than itself, or more accurately, becomes its true self. It is a certain perspective that a community like this cultivates over time, that sees the suffering of the world not as a failure, but an opportunity to grow more loving, an opportunity to grow, to discover newfound depths of compassion. I think I was right for years to think that there was no end to suffering, no bottom, and no limit. It took me years to discover that if this is true, it also means there is no end to the way compassion can manifest. There's literally no bottom or limit to our love. They are the same truth, with a pivot of perspective and experience that is gathered over time in a community like this, with regular intention and practice. Many people who don't know much about our history falsely characterize our church as a community without any kind of faith. They may think that faith is a weakness or misunderstand faith as a belief that is completely separate and has nothing to do with our lived experience. Another word I like is trust. Trust is a beautiful word, and I think accurately points to the kind of faith, if you wish to call it that our community cultivates. It does take trust that is proven by experience over time that a moment of great suffering, pain, and grief has the potential to transform our lives for the better. That is a deep trust. It is not a guarantee that this will always be so, but there is a trust that this is possible, that the potential is there, given the right conditions, the right place, and the right timing. I trust this, which is why I am heartened and grateful to be alive during this moment of potential transformation for our people, especially those who are most vulnerable systematically. I think of the moments that have brought us here. I think of the National Guard being called to send airplanes to bomb black-owned businesses in Tulsa in 1921, the massacre of a thriving middle-class black community. I think of black men being asked to surrender on their front lawns and then shot in front of their families, all their possessions burned. I think of Oxford, Mississippi, and the first black student admitted to the University of Mississippi, and the rioting this caused among whites in that town, who burned buildings, burned cars, and killed black citizens with seeming immunity. I think of the latest police murder in Atlanta just a couple days ago of Rayshard Brooks, and the growing unrest and response, not only in this country, but across our world. It is a moment of real possibility. It is a moment that I believe will cast a long shadow on the arc of history and perhaps be the ray of light that shows its bend toward justice. It is a painful, dreadful, grief-filled moment. It is a moment full of systemic corruption and perversion that seems to have no bottom and no limit. It is a moment of great precariousness. It is a moment that will sometimes keep us up at night, asking with passion questions that maybe we never thought to ask before. It is a moment of real compassion. It is a moment where the veil is lifted and we see the stark clarity and reality that was there all along. And what emerges has the potential to transform us if we allow for the right conditions, the right intention, and the right practice. It has the power to wake us up and make us more of who we actually are instead of who we thought we are. It has the potential to expand our life. And in that expansion, expand our society and our body politic. My only parting advice for myself and for all of us here is something I repeat at the beginning of our worship service. Let's not waste this. Let's not waste this moment. If it's true that there possibly is no end to suffering, no bottom, or no limit, let us awaken as a community to the flip side of this truth. This means there's also no end to compassion, no bottom or limit that can be placed on our love. That is what we are experiencing together as a community right now. And through practice and intention, this moment can be seen clearly for what it is. Painful, yes. Destabilizing, sure. Unconscionable and violent, absolutely. But also something more. Something more that is waiting for our discovery in this moment. Please pray with me. Spirit of love, please open us to this moment. Please open us up to the edges of our own understanding and open us past the edge of our understanding. Please help us to be humble. Please give us the strength to find a community like this, to find a value like compassion that we can practice and commit ourselves to. Please help us to be a source of healing for ourselves and for our world. All this we pray. Amen.
Old pirates, yes, they rob I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We pondered this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever had. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long will they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Those we keep in our hearts until we meet again.
As you depart, please remember the one great fact: you are loved and never truly alone.
Don't wanna live in New York City, man. Don't wanna live in Tokyo. Don't wanna stay in my own village, man. There's nowhere else I need to go. There's nothing that I want for myself that I don't want for everyone. To work in peace, to live in freedom, to look and never see a gun. Why are we calling this the third world? I only know that it is my world. Maybe someday it can be our world. Can you imagine our world, one world? It hurts me more than my belly. So hard to live in poverty. I want to work for my own living, man. Don't want someone to care for me. Don't want to speak of revolution. It starts to sounding like a fight. I give myself to evolution. One world will make it be alright. Why are we calling this the third world? I only know that it is my world. Maybe someday it can be our world. Can you imagine one world? Why are we calling this the third world? I only know that it is my world.